Alright everyone, it is time to talk about a new divinatory skill that maybe you haven't seen before, and that is Tasseomancy. By the way, if you want to see these videos 2 weeks earlier, consider subscribing to my Patreon, where you not only get all these videos, but also recipe cards, specific deity profiles, and lots of other interesting things to look at. Video tiers start at $10 a month, so definitely consider checking it out. So when we go on Witch Talk or other common spaces, I think one of the most clear and common things we'll see for divination is something like tarot, pendulum, maybe runes, maybe osteomancy, which is bone throws. But one that doesn't get talked about so much, and that is actually pretty cool, is tasseomancy, in which the word comes from the Arabic word tassa, meaning cup, and either mancy or graphy, meaning divination or writing, right? And actually, something like this was happening in medieval era in Europe, but they were using like wax splatters, right? They were using something that would start loose and viscous and would harden up, and then what they would do is, if they had a cup, they would just kind of read what's going on, right? They would look for certain shapes, they would look for certain styles, and that's really all that tasseomancy boils down to. You have a cup, you have something in it, and you're trying to see what shapes are in it. If you really think about it, it's kind of just an elaborate Rorschach test, but we're saying it's magic. But it can be. It can be magic. It's just also very much possibly a really cool psychological tool too. And in the nature of tasseomancy's origins, honestly, yeah, you could do this with pretty much anything. You could do it with wax driblets in cold water. You could do it with coffee or tea. You could even do it with wine sediments, right? Actually, in the 1500s, the women of the harem in the Ottoman Empire, right? So they would actually read each other's fortunes. Coffee was massive in the Ottoman Empire. There was so much coffee going on and a really rich coffee culture. And because of that, they had this whole system of reading coffee grounds. Through the Ottoman Empire's conquest of the Balkans, that's how this actually got into, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, and other such areas, and it's why my mother knew about it growing up and why she told me about it. There is also the Dutch tea trade with China in the 17th century, which brought this over to Northern and Western Europe, and they had more of the classic tea reading that you're going to see with like characters, say, Madame Trelawney in Harry Potter. Again, both of these have the same exact idea. You basically just make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and you drink the tea or the coffee, and as you get to the bottom, you see if you can see any certain shapes or any kind of omens among the leaves or the grounds. With tea, it's best done in a pale cup. That way, as you drink, you can see those dark leaves against the cup. But with coffee, it's a little bit different, and I'm actually going to show you how right now. So let's have a coffee divination.
Alright, so what I got here is some good old-fashioned Slovenian coffee. This is what we drank while we were out. You can get it at any grocery store pretty much. But obviously if you don't have this on hand, any kind of espresso will do just fine. And then you won't have to turn on your second language brain and figure out what the back says like this. But what you're going to do is cook it to package directions. So for this, it is 100 milliliters of water to 7 grams of coffee. You'll see I have here this special pot, which is pretty commonly used with Slovenian coffee. It's something that just goes right on the stove. This is a good way to make sure that your coffee actually comes out right. You can actually pay attention to it more, a lot better than you could if you were making it in a coffee maker. But a regular coffee maker will also do just fine. So once you get your water measured out however much you'd like to drink, it's time to take this all the way over to the stove and turn it on and boil it like you would a regular old tea kettle or anything like that. Since I am using such a small amount of water, this is going to boil pretty quickly, but nonetheless, here's the amount of coffee that I'm going to use, which is a lot more than I thought 7 grams of coffee was going to be honest. I'm also actually going to put my sugar in beforehand just so it can dissolve in the hot water first. You don't have to do this, I just feel like the less stuff you put in at the end, the less you're going to mess with it for it to settle. But after that, you just dump your coffee right in if you're using this kind, and you bring it back up to a boil. As this is such a small amount of water, it will be a little easy to burn this, so I'm keeping it moving and also kind of doing this thing where we just put it on low and kind of pick it up a little bit, because this kind of coffee actually does puff up a lot while it cooks. You might have heard people say things like edging your coffee, and this is kind of what they mean, because it will bubble a lot, and as soon as you take it off, it'll settle back down. You don't want it to get like all over the place or leave grinds all over the side, so this is why we do that. Then you just turn the stove off and you let it steep for a little bit, and then you pour it into your cup. Now, you do want to pour it grounds and all, which I know seems very odd, but that is how we're going to do this tasseomancy thing. And right before it has a chance to settle, pour whatever else you wanted. If you wanted to do sugar here, you could. If you want to do milk here, definitely do so. And then you're going to stir it up and you're going to let it sit for a little while so all of those grounds can settle on the bottom. And you'll notice I have a saucer. That saucer is going to be really, really important for this divination. But once it has settled and cooled enough, go ahead and drink it. And man, I gotta say, this is really good coffee. This brings me right back to sitting in Slovenia. But as I drink, you can already see that some of those lines are starting to gather on the sides. And now, as you drink, you will kind of feel like you're drinking a mouthful of sand. That is the nature of this. But you're going to take that cup there now and pour it right over onto your saucer. Tap it a little bit to get any grounds as much out as you can. And at this point, I was focusing too much on what looked like a woman holding a basket with a heart in it, but I wasn't getting a message that that was what I was supposed to be looking at. Eventually, later, I did see this right here, which looks like a dog, a person, and an angel. But honestly, I wasn't really sure what that meant, so I naturally turned to a divination source I was a lot more familiar with, which is tarot. I asked God to clarify or verify, and this is what I pulled. Step 1, Ace of Wands, which in the Golden Tarot is an angel. Step 2, the Fool reversed, which does have a person and a dog on it. Even a person holding something, honestly. To me, that was pretty uncanny and a good clarification. Here's the interpretation of Ace of Wands, and here's the interpretation of the Fool reversed. Now, honestly, after getting these cards, I was able to see what God meant a lot better. And that's because I'm used to tarot cards. I couldn't really understand what these symbols were supposed to mean in just a random, image on a coffee cup. But when put into tarot perspective, that's a language I speak pretty well at this point. I will also say, though, that if the Fool had been right side up, it would have actually been exactly parallel to the image that I saw in that cup right there, as you can see. But the Fool reversed was important in terms of its message, and that dog represented the problem I was experiencing.
And just like that, you saw a real bona fide Tasseomancy reading with Slovenian coffee. It's not that intensive of a process. It absolutely will leave you feeling like you just drank a mouthful of sand, but it is very interesting. As you can see here, the message we got was pretty much parallel. I was quite shocked to see that the same exact symbols in the cards showed up as they did in the cup, but then again, what did I expect when I asked God to verify, right? This is something that if you are okay with drinking a little bit of tea leaves or a little bit of grounds, by all means go for it. It is difficult at first if you don't exactly know what to look for or what the symbols mean. For instance, I saw a dog. To me, I mean, okay, it's a dog. What exactly does that mean? That's why I backed it up with a divination method that I am more familiar with. And if you're going to learn a whole new method of divination, I recommend you do that. I recommend that you back it up with something you're more familiar with and keep going that way until you can start doing it without the crutch of your more familiar divination method. Like any other skill, it takes practice, but with practice, you can get close to perfect, right? Because divination is never a perfect science. All that being said, that is a brief explanation of Tasseomancy as well as a demo, so with that, I will see you next month for a new series, a Saint of the Month. Until then, see ya!